Okay, so today I am very excited to be speaking with Kathleen Lo from Border. Border is a company that helps you get all your basic essentials when you're moving to Portugal, the bureaucratic essentials like a NIF number and a Portuguese bank account. So Kathleen, could you maybe tell me a little bit about yourself and why you decided to move to Portugal?
Totally. Hi, James. Thanks for having me. So yeah, a little bit about myself. My husband and I moved to Portugal close to, or about 2 years ago now. It's crazy with the pandemic and all. Time kind
Yeah.
of is all a blur. But yeah, we used to be based in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. We left in 2018 to do the whole digital nomad thing. We did that for 2 years, and it was a lot of fun. And coming up on our third year, we were kind of looking for like a longer term base to sort of settle in.
Yeah.
And that's how we came across Portugal and the D7 visa, which is a perfect fit for remote workers. So we applied for that, came here, arrived in February 2020, right before the pandemic hit. So our experience actually of Portugal has been quite unique in that sense. But yeah, we picked Portugal because we had visited Porto and had lived there for a month during our digital nomad stint and really liked it. And then we had one of our friends who moved to Portugal on the golden visa. Portugal is just like well known for its like good climate, friendly people, good food. So yeah, we wanted to give it a shot, and now we've been here 2 years, and it is now our new home.
Yeah, so good decision.
Yep, definitely.
And I'm pleased that you say that you came to the D7 as a sort of a young person, or a remote worker or a
Mhm.
digital nomad, because a lot of people get confused as to whether that's possible or not. And it is very, very confusing because often it's seen as something that's just for retirement, but you were able to apply on it and your husband was able to apply on it and move to Portugal.
Oh, absolutely. When we first discovered it through some blog posts, and then we actually scheduled some meetings with some lawyers to get an idea, because like it's often communicated as a retirement visa, but then we were curious, like having income from outside of Portugal, can it be from like our web design business, which we were running at the time? We had talked to a few law firms and got mixed responses. Some people were like, no, you can only apply for this if you have passive income. Ultimately ended up talking to one agency that was like, yeah, we work with several remote workers, digital nomads, you should totally give it a shot. We were like, okay, if one person said it's okay, we should go and try it out. And that's what we did. It was funny because when we submitted our application in person in VFS in Washington, DC, the person who like received our D7 application was quite surprised. And she was like, you're the youngest people that we've seen apply for this visa. But I think like with kind of like the onset of COVID and remote work becoming more popular, I think that Portugal D7 is becoming more well known with remote workers.
Yeah, that's great. And you're not actually the first person I've heard of who has applied for the D7 as a sort of a younger remote worker, and the person's sort of looked at them and gone, "You are about 40 years too young to be applying for this." But they were also successful and able to get it, and they are in Portugal now.
Oh, awesome.
So did you need a NIF number when you were applying?
So fortunately, at the time that we applied for our D7 visas, we did not need a NIF, nor did we need a bank account. When we applied, they said that we would need to get our NIF number and our Portuguese bank account once we get to Portugal in preparation for our SEF appointment over here to get the residency cards.
Okay, so that's a lot easier because at the moment, a lot of people, and I imagine a lot of the people that are coming to Border are finding out that they need to get a NIF number and often a Portuguese bank account before they move to Portugal, which is quite a confusing thing to ask someone to do if they're on the other side of the world.
Totally. Especially with like the pandemic and it being hard for people to fly. That's why like when we first started Border, we launched the NIF product first. And shortly after, after running that for like a month, a lot of customers were coming back to us and they were like, hey, we actually need the NIF number in order to open the bank account, because now this is a requirement to apply for the visa in the first place. So yeah, that was actually like one of the things that really pushed us to create the remote bank account setup service that we have.
And were both of those easy to get started? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no.
The services, they were quite challenging, to put simply. It's been really challenging and also fulfilling to learn how to navigate kind of like Portuguese bureaucracy in the way that things work over here. Like as a foreigner, it's our first time doing business, and we're like picking, I think, one of like the harder things to
Yeah.
to tackle. But I think like with time and seeing like all the different scenarios and working with different customers and having like our trusted partners, like we work with lawyers, like independent lawyers, law firms, we're able to, and the banks, of course, because like we're not a bank ourselves. So we work with the largest bank in Portugal to open our bank accounts. Our goal is really to, like streamline the process. It's like not too easy to get it started. But once you get there, kind of like moving along.
Okay, now it's the wheels are in operation.
Yeah, totally.
So I have a lot of questions about the NIF for you. Portugalist readers have responded to my email I sent out I think a few months ago now, just asking them what they wanted to know. And most of the time, the questions are very simple, which is, how do I get a NIF and do I really need to get one? But there are a few other ones that are a little bit more unusual. So I thought I would just run through them with you.
Yeah.
Should we start with a very simple one, which is what is a NIF?
So a NIF is short for Número de Identificação Fiscal.
This is impressive Portuguese.
Which is, oh, you're too kind. Which is basically your personal tax identification number. And so in Portugal, it's a 9-digit number that's assigned to you. It's a permanent number. And you basically need this number in order to complete any kind of like official transaction in the country. So to give you an idea, you would need a NIF to open a bank account, to set up utilities for your apartment, to rent an apartment, to get employed in Portugal, to enroll in school, and a handful of other things.
Okay, so it sounds like this is very essential and you wouldn't get very far without one.
Totally.
But I'm trying to think if there's an equivalent that people might be aware of, perhaps in the US, where I know you lived before. I'm thinking about in the UK and Ireland, where I've lived, we have what's called in the UK is a national insurance number, which you would give to your employer when you're starting a job so that they can take the right amount of tax from you. And you do use a little bit with some dealings with the government, but I would never go into a clothes shop and someone would ask me when I'm buying a pair of jeans for it. So do you know of an equivalent elsewhere, or have you come across it?
Totally. That took me by surprise too. I would say it sounds like the number in the UK and the US is quite similar. In the US, we call it the Social Security number. And you would use this number for tax purposes. Like if you have an employer, it's a very sensitive number. You would never give it out, you never say it out loud or in public. I'd say that's like the closest equivalent in the US, but it's not as widely used. Like you wouldn't need to give your social security number to set up utilities, for example.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be the same for in the UK and Ireland. And so when people are coming to Border and they are looking for a NIF, what are the main reasons? Is it because they're at the visa application stage and they need it?
We find that that's the most common reason that people are getting it and need assistance, while they're still abroad. Other individuals are, let's say, like people who are in the EU and let's say aren't able to make the trip over to Portugal, will use Border to get their NIF. Let's say if they're like planning to apply for NHR or interested in perhaps purchasing property. We also have customers who apply for their NIFs because they got a job in Portugal. And so they're getting their paperwork ready for that new job.
Okay. So someone who's from the EU would be able to come to Portugal fairly easily and get it without legal assistance, without normally using it, but maybe at the moment that's been a little bit more difficult with the pandemic.
Totally. Yeah, because EU residents actually can walk into any finanzas, which is the tax office, and request a NIF on their own using their EU proof of address. But yeah, COVID has made that a little bit difficult. So if you need assistance with that, then you can go through border, and then you would assign a fiscal you would assign our lawyers as a fiscal representative in order to request a NIF on your behalf. But after that's complete, you have your NIF, you have access to the online portal, you can actually remove your fiscal representative and use your EU address as the main kind of like address where communications are sent to.
Okay. And I imagine it's probably in terms of whether you would save money coming to Portugal or using a service like Border. There can't be a lot in it when you consider the cost of, say, flying from another EU country to Portugal, staying for at least a day or two, and then going to finances. So it could be worthwhile even for people from EU in a non-pandemic situation, which we may get to one day soon.
Let's see.
So if I have this NIF number, is that going to help me get residency in Portugal?
Not necessarily. So from what we've heard, it seems like a lot of the consulates are now requiring that you have a NIF number in order to apply for the visa in the first chance. So maybe quite the opposite. Maybe like not having a NIF might mean that your chances for getting the residency might be decreased because you wouldn't have the complete requirements. But yeah, having the NIF, I'd say like wouldn't necessarily increase the chances of you getting the visa.
I guess visas are normally based on you having like a certain qualification or a certain amount of money, which sort of makes you unique as an individual, whereas a NIF is something that anyone could actually get.
Absolutely.
So
for example, I was going to say, like, for example, for the D7, one of the main qualifications is that you're able to prove that you have a certain amount of income coming from a source outside of Portugal. So I'd say that would be kind of like a requirement that would then increase your chances of getting that visa.
Okay, and the NIF is just just a normal requirement you need, say like your birth certificate or a criminal records check or whatever it is they're asking for. It's just a standard thing.
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a question then from someone asking, do non-EU residents, so I guess someone maybe in the United States or in Australia, need to use a lawyer as their fiscal representative? If they know someone in Portugal already, could they ask them to help them get the NIF and be a representative?
Yeah, so for non-EU residents, they definitely need to have a fiscal representative in Portugal. That fiscal representative does not necessarily have to be a lawyer. So if, let's say, you have a trusted friend or family member who is based in Portugal, for as long as they are a Portuguese tax resident and they are a permanent resident or citizen, then they can absolutely be your fiscal representative.
Okay, well, that's good to know for anyone who's lucky to have that. But often I think it's the case that people don't have any kind of connection when they're moving to Portugal. I think it's sort of rare that people have, say, a family member or a friend already there. These are all the things you end up getting after you move to Portugal, usually, unfortunately.
Totally.
So a similar question to that, which is, I guess, coming from the other side, someone has asked me to be their fiscal representative. What are the legal and financial ramifications of this, and could it end up costing me?
Yeah, so as someone's fiscal representative, your main obligation is to be able to receive notices from the tax office and to forward those to the tax, not really taxpayer, but to the NIF holder, rather. So if you fail to forward these communications, or if you're not able to prove that you fulfilled your responsibilities as a fiscal representative and communicated this to the NIF holder, then you could potentially get hit with a fine. So I would say that being a fiscal representative does come with like its responsibilities.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I don't know if I would personally like it because I don't know. I already, whenever I'm away from home, I'm worried that there's going to be some letter from somebody waiting for me when I get back. And I think if you're the kind of person who likes to go away a lot, you don't want to be responsible for, for mail coming to your property and you not being there to answer it.
Totally. Yeah. You don't just have to worry about missing your own mail, but missing mail that's meant for someone else that you have the responsibility
exactly.
to forward.
It is double the stress.
Totally.
So does the NIF number expire is the next question. So if people have asked this for a couple of different reasons. Sometimes it's that they have lived in Portugal many, many years ago and they had a NIF number there and they're wondering if it's expired like a mobile phone number would, or it's that they're planning on moving to Portugal in a few years and they're wondering about sort of getting things organized now and whether the NIF number would still be valid then.
Yeah, so the NIF number does not expire. It is permanent and it's assigned to you for life. It doesn't need to be maintained or renewed either. So in the situation that you mentioned, let's say if you hadn't, or if you had applied for a NIF a few years back and then are now moving to Portugal, you will still use that same NIF number.
Okay, perfect. And let's say I've forgotten it, which is quite likely, I think. Is it easy to find out again what that NIF number is?
So if you're in Portugal, you can easily find out your NIF number by going to a finances office and bringing in like some sort of documentation so that they can pull up that number for you. If you're abroad, then your best chance is to go to a Portuguese embassy or consulate, and they should be able to assist.
Okay, so there will definitely be a record of it, and it sounds like it should be easy to get a hold of. So in terms of applying for it, some people are wondering whether everybody in the family needs one. So could a married couple share a NIF like they would do maybe with a bank account?
So each individual needs their own NIF number, whether you're like an adult or a child. Yeah, it's assigned per person. So that you would need on an individual basis compared to a bank account where you can absolutely open a joint bank account where it's one account with two or more holders.
Okay. And so you mentioned that children might need a NIF there. At what age does a child need a NIF?
So there isn't like a strict age requirement in terms of like needing a NIF at a certain age, but you will find that children need a NIF in order to enroll in school. So that's kind of like the common forcing function for for getting a NIF for a child.
Okay, so yeah, I can imagine what sort of age that was, because it is, I guess it's just to keep all your records in one place. Presumably when a child goes to the shop to buy sweets or something, they're not looking to track what he's spending his money on.
Totally.
Okay, so maybe school age then would be the first age that they would need it. And then we come to tax related questions, which is, I think, everybody's favorite subject that they want to know is how can I pay less tax? And that is the question that people are asking was, will having this NIF help reduce the amount of tax that they pay in Portugal?
So there is a concept of putting like associating your NIF with invoices or receipts for day-to-day purchases. And Portugal has like certain categories of things and corresponding amounts of I guess, expenses that you can deduct. So in that sense, when you request an invoice or receipt with your NIF, which is why it's the NIF is given in grocery stores, because, you know, like I think food is like one category of that. You can deduct these expenses from your personal income tax.
Okay.
There are like limits on the amounts and certain categories, but best to talk to an accountant for the specifics on that.
And I think if you are asked for it, best just to give it over just in case that is going to reduce the amount of tax you pay.
Yeah, there's like no harm in giving your NIF, and you know, if it's a purchase that you made, then absolutely.
Because initially when I first heard of the concept, I thought it was very strange, you know, the idea of the government tracking everything that you're spending money on. But then when I thought about it, I thought, well, you know, if I go to the supermarket or something, I will probably have like a loyalty card that I use, or, you know, credit card. So I'm giving I'm giving all this information out to companies anyway. It's not really too big a change to give it out to the Portuguese government.
Yeah, and it might benefit you if you're able to take those deductions.
And there are other sort of benefits that come with it as well, in the form of prizes, which is an unusual concept, I think, of the NIF number. So I understand you get put into a draw. What prize could I potentially win from this draw?
Yeah, it's actually funny when you asked me this question. I was like, I didn't know that this existed for, for NIF numbers, but I looked into it. And yeah, the government has this notion of fatura de sorte, which stands for lucky invoice draw. And basically, like, for all the invoices that have NIFs attached, they have these drawings or awardings and award treasury certificates of 35,000 euros in weekly contests. And I think I imagine that this is to encourage, businesses to issue invoices and receipts for transactions and sales that they make.
Well, it's certainly worth doing it then in that case, if you have a chance to win 35,000, like potentially every week. Yeah. I don't actually think I know or have heard of anyone winning, but I could, I don't know anyone who's won the lotto anyway, and I will keep trying that one. So might as well increase my chances with this one too. So next few questions are then, the last few are about leaving Portugal, because I think a lot of people when they're thinking about moving to Portugal, some of them are thinking this is going to be for 5 or 10 years only. Other people are thinking this is for life. But if you are thinking that it's going to be sort of medium term, you're wondering what happens to your NIF number after you decide to go. So one person has said that they left Portugal already and they've moved to another country, this time an EU country. And they didn't update their address, the new one, before they left, because they didn't actually know what it was going to be, which I think is fair enough. And can they change that now? And what happens if they don't?
Totally. So if you, let's say, were in Portugal and you have a NIF number, you lived in Portugal, you changed the address on your NIF to a Portuguese address, which indicates that you are a Portuguese tax resident. Once you leave the country, you should definitely update the address associated with your NIF so that you will no longer be considered a tax resident of Portugal. And that just, makes it clear to the tax office, like, hey, I no longer reside in Portugal. Here's my new EU address, let's say in Germany. I am now a tax resident of Germany. And so if you've already left the country, the easiest way to do this would be through the Portal das Finanças website, where you can, go in, submit a request ticket, upload a proof of address, and request for the finances to change your address associated with your NIF.
Okay. And I think it sounds like it makes sense to do that, because you want to sort of make it clear that you have definitely left Portugal and you don't have any obligations there anymore.
Totally. And yeah, we have step-by-step instructions on how to update your address, which perhaps you can share a link to in the description.
I will. That is exactly what I will do. I will share a link in the description, and there will be an article that corresponds with this as well, and I'll put a link in there too.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, because the Portal das Finanças does not have an English setting.
Okay.
So it's very interesting to navigate. So we basically just have screenshots of like, click here, and this is like what this button translates to.
Well, hopefully one day they will get an English translation for it. Okay, so next one, I'm leaving Portugal forever. This is a very specific forever, and moving to a non-EU country this time. Can I cancel my NIF number, because I don't want to have to pay for a fiscal representative, and I don't want any more ties to Portugal?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one because the NIF number is permanent. The Portugal tax office does not allow you to cancel or like nullify or void a NIF once you've gotten one. And so let's say you got in your NIF and then you later on decide, let's say because you need it for a visa application, but things change and maybe you're not able to move to Portugal anymore. This means that you actually never switched over to non-resident. And let's say if you got your NIF through border, then your fiscal representative is actually your fiscal representative indefinitely. Right. So I guess at border, we understand that like plans change. So internally, like we've come up with this agreement where it's like, if you, let's say, never moved to Portugal and you've never used your NIF, but you had to get one because you had a visa, we basically just have an agreement that you can sign, which is like, hey, if I agree like not to ever use my NIF, and that way your fiscal representative doesn't have any like burden or responsibility, because you will never live in Portugal, be a tax resident, you'll never have to file taxes, so they'll never really have to like communicate anything for you.
Okay.
That's kind of like our workaround for it in our company, or how we handle it.
Okay, it sounds like it was something that was maybe it wasn't thought about so much with expats who move to Portugal, who are sometimes a bit more transient. I guess if you're Portuguese, you're less likely to move somewhere else, and if you do, you're very likely to have a friend or family member that you could have asked for it. So yeah, there's just this little gray area here.
Yeah, hopefully legislation catches up, with like Portugal being more popular with expats and more people coming in, and the NIF being a requirement for the visa application, because this is like a really tricky one actually. And as you said, like I think it's a problem that's come up more in recent years.
Okay. And I think that is all the questions that I have for you. So thank you very much for answering them.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And can you tell me a little bit more about Border, where they can find you and get more information?
Yeah, so you can find us at border.io. That's
okay.
BORDR.io. To get more information, we basically have, full information about our NIF service, our bank account service, requirements. We also have an excellent kind of like knowledge base. You'll notice it's like a little, sometimes people miss it, but there's a little icon in the lower right-hand corner of our website. And there you can search all the frequently asked questions. Like, do I need a fiscal representative as an EU citizen? What counts as proof of address? All the things. So we have that on our website. And if you have any additional questions, you can always shoot us an email at support@border.io. And we have a team who gets back to all emails within 24 hours.